is the Langmuir Systems Crossfire 2x2 CNC plasma cutter table, the table that you need. Well, there's a lot of good reviews on YouTube, and there's a lot of people suggesting go out there and buy it right now, but I think you guys know me a little bit better than that. So let's just talk about my experience with it, some of the things you might encounter while you have it, and if you choose to purchase it, then I'll give you some stuff to help you out. That's what we're going to do today.
Season 5.
Full disclosure, I have to give this to you. I am not being paid for this video, but I also did not pay for this table. Langmuir Systems actually sent this Crossfire 2x2 CNC plasma table out for us to review and kind of analyze and tell you guys what we think about it. And that's exactly what I'm known for doing. So let's just kind of dig into this for a little bit. I do have some stuff to clean up, and we'll just kind of go through everything as I'm going through it. But as the price tag would suggest, it's very attractive, which means a lot of people are going to be buying it that really would never have an opportunity to get into things like CNC plasma cutting or anything else like that. So rather than, you know, saying go out and buy it right now and this is the greatest shot in the world, let's just kind of look at this objectively and say maybe this is the table for you, maybe it's not. And if you have a CNC Crossfire from Langmuir Systems, then maybe you're going to need some help. And that's exactly also part of what I'm going to do to help you guys out here. So let's just start with the assembly while I get the rest of this water off the floor.
So my initial plan was actually to do a full assembly video for you guys, but you know what, Langmuir Systems has a whole bunch of them, so to avoid confusion or anything else like that, just follow theirs. But everything as far as packaging is concerned was actually packaged pretty well. It's a big box, it weighs like 130 pounds, and if you got more pieces and parts like a water table or laptop stand or whatever else, or even a plasma cutter, you're going to get separate boxes. But all of them are pretty much in this one box, and everything is labeled pretty well, so there's not a whole lot of confusion or anything. And of course that all coincides with the videos that Langmuir Systems put together. The gantry is kind of lucky. It's all assembled in one unit, packaged in a lot of bubble wrap. So as soon as you get all of it out there, you're going to be faced with those videos. Now give yourself a lot of time to watch these, because it's a little bit tricky to just, you know, kind of follow along. You have to go back and forth, make sure your orientation's correct, and if they said something in one video and you forgot and now you got to go back and find it, it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. But like I said, give yourself some extra time. Now, it's not like ridiculously difficult to put this thing together or anything like that. You just kind of got to pay attention to it and, you know, go for it. And it assembles relatively easy. It's just, you know, one piece after the other and then, you know, go back and assemble it again. It's really not rocket science or anything like that. You don't have to be intimidated by it. Everything is pretty self-explanatory. One thing I will tell you, because it wasn't necessarily mentioned well or covered in a video from Langmuir, but the washers, the rubber washers that are on there, they you need to clear the chips and you need to make sure that they're torqued correctly, not too tight, not too soft, because you don't want to tear that rubber, otherwise your water table is going to leak. Once you get it all together, the slats go in just the way that they should. They were cut pretty even as far as I could tell. Everything fits together. This is one issue that I had, this lead screw bearing. The first one I put in here was rather sloppy. It was wobbling around quite a bit. Once I got the screws on there, it seemed to be okay, but just like these little tiny details like this, it may cause some cut problems. But on the opposite one, when I had to screw in the other one, it didn't just fall in there nice and easy. I had to force it in there essentially, and that was just by walking these two screws in little by little. And then I popped it out and put it into the other side and made sure that it wasn't just the bearing or something like that, and it fit the same way with both bearings. So maybe you'll have some issues with that, maybe you won't, I don't know. I'm just kind of reporting what I have here. The control box goes on pretty well. Pretty straightforward. Laptop stand, also very straightforward. You know, make sure you're sitting in a chair, kind of get an idea of where you want it before you set it, but as soon as it's all together, you know, that's, you know, pretty much it. You're pretty much ready to roll.
Okay. Assembly is complete. Now, you might have found that a little frustrating. You might have found it super easy following along with videos. Me personally, I feel it's very time consuming, but they did a really good job putting them together and they are relatively easy to follow. It just took me days to put this together instead of hours to put it together. So I already did submit a suggestion saying, hey, maybe just like a downloadable PDF or something like that in the future to where we can read the instructions and follow along a lot easier. You know, and they were totally cool with it. They said, yeah, we're going to work on that. You know, and it's really great to see a company actually respond and, you know, be receptive to suggestions and stuff like that. So it's really cool that they're actually listening and that they're going along with it. Now, frustrations are something that we're going just to have to deal with. We're going to have to learn how to work around this stuff. The only reason I'm bringing all of this stuff up is because it might help explain some of the problems that you're having. Now, I do have a free downloadable line program that will help you dial this in, and we'll get into showing you how all that works and all the rest of that good stuff. But let's talk about the absence of some pieces that usually are included on a table that make it a much more pleasurable experience when it comes to cutting that this table just flat out doesn't have. One of those is the torch height controller. This torch height is locked or static wherever you set it. So we're going to go move it in place. We're going to put a shim underneath it, and then that's the height that the thing's going to stay at the whole time, which means it might be knocked out of the optimal range. And since we only have 2 shims to work with here, you know, there's literally thousands of positions that torch could be in for an optimal cut quality, so you may not have a really good cut quality. Now, things like your plate, if it's got any kind of difference in height across the entire thing, we might, you know, set it here, have really good cut quality in this corner, but up there it may be terrible. If it's got a bow in it, it may have some really bad cut quality on it. So if it's not perfectly flat, it's not going to come out just right. You know, you may see some imperfections in it or whatever the case is. Now, I've been looking around, and I've seen a few handful of people that have added their own torch height controller, their own automatic torch height controller. I don't believe it's from Langmuir Systems. I believe they're just making it themselves. Maybe in the future an automatic torch height controller would be on here, but for right now it doesn't exist. The other thing that we may be experiencing problems with is from this gantry. Now, this is a cantilever style single motor gantry system, meaning that the other side has absolutely zero support on it whatsoever. It literally floats over there. Now, this is pretty sturdy over here on this rail, but you can notice that the slightest amount of tap on it, you get a vibration down on that end. That loosely translates to ever-changing torch height. So if there's any kind of vibrations or anything else like that, or any kind of you know, noise, or even just the movement of the arm going across back and forth, it's going to be a little heavier on this end than it is on this end. Basically meaning, if your part that you are cutting is the size of the table, you'll probably have a better cut quality on the inside closest to the rails than you will on the outside. That's something you're just going to have to deal with. Right now, there is absolutely no stability on that end. You might be able to cut out something with some wheels or something to make it a little bit easier to use or whatever, but right now it doesn't exist. So you're going to have to deal with that, and that might be very frustrating. The other thing is these motors. Now, these motors are not necessarily bad, but they're not necessarily capable of running rapid speeds or the higher speeds that we typically run when we're plasma cutting. In other words, they are kind of wimpy, a little small, a little bit on the cheaper side, which means they will likely skip a beat. And if you you know, run it too fast, too hard, or whatever the case is, you're going to see you know, definitely some cut quality problems in your part. I'm not saying that they're crap. I'm saying they just have to work within a certain speed, and that speed is a lot lower. When we run low speed, we're seeing low speed dross. Low speed dross is a real pain in the butt to deal with, but nevertheless, they work. You just have to learn to work with them. Now, by design, the machine is on wheels, and when it's on wheels and we start running in a little bit higher speeds, the table's going to start shaking around, it's going to start going crazy. And the other problem that I had, and I've submitted this as a suggestion as well, which they said that they were working on, the wheels tend to fall off. Now, there's a couple of times, even when shooting this video, and you saw at the beginning of the video that I was mopping up the floor, that's because I was trying to move this thing just a little bit out of the way and reposition, and the wheel fell off again. That's the second time that it's happened. I'm pretty sure it's going to happen again, but if you don't want it to happen or you are worried about it, just drop a tack weld or two on those wheels to make sure that they don't fall off. You saw that they were just hammered into the tube, so you got to be careful with that. But if you do weld, watch out for the box here. That box should be completely disconnected from the entire machine when you go and weld. Especially if you TIG weld, high frequency, anything else like that could damage the electronics because they are not shielded from high frequency noise. So you got to be careful with that. But aside from that, there's a few things that you should know about this. One, maintenance. You got to take care of those slats, because if you don't take care of the slats, you're going to run into cut quality problems. The thing is, like we mentioned before, we're going to run this table at a little bit lower of a speed, which means more dross is going to accumulate on the back side of the part, and that also sticks to the slats. When you pull your part up, you might notice that there's a big old booger or something sitting above the slat or above the slat height. That has to get knocked back down. So you're regularly going to have to grind it and flatten the slats back out, so that way your plate stays nice and flat. If your plate is not nice and flat, the torch will not be able to compensate for it. Remember, we don't have an automatic torch height controller. It's static, it's only in one position. So something as simple as not maintaining the slats or cleaning them after almost every single cut in some cases, you're going to have cut quality problems, because that torch height will basically be changed by the difference in the thickness of the plate. Now, the plate itself, dross. It's going to accumulate. And when it accumulates like that, if you don't bang it off there, remove it, grind it, whatever the case is, it's also going to cause a difference in height. And you have to be able to control that, or you have to actually try to limit that as much as possible. Keep this plate super flat. If that means you got to clean it after every single cut, then you got to clean it after every single cut. There's a lot of maintenance involved in something like this. That's kind of what drives the price down. That's kind of what makes it a lot more, affordable. But it also makes it a lot more time consuming to deal with something like that, and you have to be aware of it because everything that we mentioned here is going to affect the cut quality. So what else affects cut quality? Right there, the power source, the plasma machine that you install or hook up into your machine. Now this is from Harbor Freight. It's I only chose to go there because one, it's a pretty popular unit. This is the version 2 that is approved, or the generation 2 that is approved to be used with this table. It does not have high frequency, but the price is right. I got a Harbor Freight just down the street. If the thing sucks, I can take it back, whatever the case. That's why I chose to go with it. Is it a weak unit? Yeah, it's not, not the greatest thing. The consumables and stuff like that, you're going to have to go through a whole lot of them, especially when you're running with a system like this. Now, there are currently over 100 models listed that you can hook into this table and run with, and you can even buy a plasma cutter with your actual table itself. Langmuir System sells a couple of different models, but this is going to change your cut quality depending on the model that you go with. It also changes the variety of things that you can cut with it, or the thicknesses you can do. Now, this is one thing that you really got to pay attention to, and I mean seriously pay attention to it. The number that they actually tell you that you can cut, or the thickness that you can run at the speed you can run at, it's really going to be about half of that when you automate it, or when you mechanize this. When you put it onto a CNC machine, that number pretty much disappears, as in maximum thickness capability. So you may have a machine that will sever like 5/8 of an inch, but you better bet your butt that it's not going to actually cut anywhere near that, or even half of that. It's one of those things that you got to have a really good power system or a really good plasma cutter to hook into your machine. And another thing, the duty cycle. Now, duty cycle may be one of the most important things to consider aside from the amperage output of a machine. Thing is, this unit as it sits right now has absolutely no feedback whatsoever to the computer. The computer controls the table. So if you hit duty cycle in the middle of a part, and maybe that's just a very intricate part, or one that's going to take a lot of cutting time, or maybe it's out of an expensive metal or something like that, if that torch flames out, the computer doesn't know it, which means the machine's going to continue to run. All the computer does is tell the torch when to turn on and off. That's it, right? So if we lose that feedback, the machine's going to keep on going, and there's no way you're going to be able to get to the exact point in time where it flamed out, right? Because you're going to see it happen, and it's going to be like 20 lines ahead of it already. So realistically speaking, you need to get a machine with a really good duty cycle, and of course one that is matched to the actual realistic capable thickness, which is about half of what the machine puts out. So make sure you don't go cheap on it. This is just a cheapo right now just to see what it can do, but no matter what machine you have, you're gonna have to get it dialed in. Now, since there's about 100 different machines you can plug in and use on this table, that means if you asked 100 people that had all 100 machines what their settings were for feeds and speeds and everything else like that, you're gonna get 100 different answers, which means if you don't have one of those machines, or even if you do, it's going to change. Something's going to be different. So you might end up having a whole lot of frustrations. Now, at the present time, there's a pretty decent forum. There's actually a lot of forums. There's a lot of information online. But when you plug in somebody else's numbers and try to run it yourself, you might not see the same results. So my suggestion, completely skip all that for right now, and let's just work on something very simple. I developed a line program, and this basically is nothing more than a continuous run from start to finish that includes everything that the machine would go through. Something like a sharp corner, for example, a long radius, a short radius, a lead-in, the termination of the torch, and it cuts it all out so you can hold the part afterwards, analyze, look at it, and figure out what you can do to improve on your cut speed. The beauty of this, you don't need any kind of experience whatsoever. You don't need to program anything. It's literally just the G code. You load it up, you make your adjustments, you watch it cut. The downside, you're going to have to do a lot of cutting, just the same as you would anymore, but theoretically with a line program that will help you reduce the amount of cut time that you need to do. So make sure you have a lot of metal on deck. Every time you change the thickness, every time you change the material type that you're cutting, you're going to have to run the line program again, which basically means run it until it's perfect. Make note of it, so that way you can program it in the future for your feeds and speeds and everything else like that, and then, try again with a different one. Note it all down, write it all down, make sure that you have it. Now the line program is ridiculously easy to run. You don't need any programming knowledge or anything whatsoever. It's already preset in the G code. All you gotta do is load the G code directly into Mach 3 and off you go. Once we have it set in there, we're gonna go ahead and move our torch into position. I'm just gonna go for like an average space to cut here. But you do gotta remember that this machine does not have any safety stops on it whatsoever. So if you're not paying attention or you set it too far to the outside, you're gonna crash it. And crashing, it's not a good thing. In fact, it's kind of a terrible thing. Now this program always starts on the lower left corner of the part, as in 0, 0 of the part. So wherever you set this up, it's always gonna go up and away from where you're sitting, or at least on this operator's station side. So remember that. You can't be too far on the outside, and you don't have to worry about being too far on the inside either. But if you're too close to the inside, the lead in on the border cut might crash your machine. So again, no safeties whatsoever. Make sure that you have ample space in which you can work with. So I'm going to get this relatively close to where I want to run it, and I'm going to set my torch height. Now the torch height, or the standoff height, we're going to start with the 60 thou shim here, and that's primarily because the user manual from Harbor Freight for this little junky unit that I have specifies that it works best on a 1/16 of an inch standoff height, or torch height if you will. So where I have it set, I'm feeling good. This will probably work out just fine. I'm going to 0x, 0y, and we're just going to fire this thing off and not stare at the light. I'll just shut that off right now so we can save some time here. Now when we get it out of the way, make sure that your part's cooled off before you actually go poking at it, because it may burn you. Now, this was cut at 50 inches per minute with 40 amps. And you can see we've got a lot of low speed dross on here. So we have two options. Deal with it, which means we'll have to end up killing all that dross, getting off there. It may come off with a hammer, we might have to grind it, we may have to do a lot of stuff to it, but generally speaking, do we like the cut quality? Is it straight? Is it, do we have any kind of beveling or anything else like that? Now, if you see like a major bevel over here or something like that, we're looking at things like torch height, we're looking at condition of consumables, if they're worn out or whatever. If we have a serious amount of warpage, then we're definitely looking at something like too much heat that went into the part, so we can reduce amperage or increase speed. But can our machine do better than this? So that's where we're at right now. If we're satisfied with this, then let's just run with this. That's just the way it goes. But maybe I want to turn that speed up a little bit and see if I can get going a bit faster on this one. And then we'll see how that one compares. Now we're going to run the line program again the exact same as we did before, except for this time I'm going to reset my 0 to the new location of wherever that's going to be at. So 0x, 0y. I've rewound the G code, and this time I think I can get away with 70 inches per minute. It's literally just going to be a guess. So I'm going to manually override the feed rate of the machine to 70 inches per minute. Now we're going to run it again. Okay, let's take this 40 amps at 50 inches per minute. Take a look here. Got a difference in the dross for sure. This one produces a little bit less dross, so theoretically we could go a little bit faster. But you know, it all depends. Let's take a look at the sides, cut quality on here. Notice that we got a pretty insane looking bevel on there. That's pretty gnarly. We don't have the bevel on the 50 amp, so that bevel basically means as the arc was being dragged, it had too much of a tail on it versus the lead, so it was being dragged like this. The minute we changed direction, it didn't have time to finish its cut this way, so it literally just goes that way. Or it could mean that your consumables are worn out, which I expect nothing less from a Harbor Freight. machine to do that. So if 70 is a little bit too fast, gives us a bevel, but reduces our dross, maybe we can slow it down just a hair. Maybe we'll go to like 60, 65. Let's see what that does. Okay, feed rate overridden to 60 inches per minute. Let's give it a go. So let's take a look at these again. We got 40 amps at 50 inches per minute, which produced like snot freezing off the backside of there. That's some seriously heavy duty, low speed dross. So we could definitely speed it up there. So we went up to 70 inches per minute, but we ended up getting a bevel out of it and less dross. So maybe we want to deal with that bevel, maybe we don't. You know, it's up to you. There's other ways you can do it. Also might be in consumables, getting good ones, crappy ones, you know, whatever the case is. So we slowed it down a little bit more to 60 inches per minute. We have still less dross than the 50, and we pretty much lost the bevel, which is where we're at. So I might be satisfied with that. I might want to dial it in a little bit more, but everything is going to change it. So you can adjust your air pressure, more, less, whatever. You can adjust your amperage, less, more, speed, torque height, everything. The point of this, do this over and over and over and over and over until you actually get it just right, or the best you can get out of all the results you have. It's going to take a while, but again, once you change your material out, you change the type, you change the thickness, you change anything, you're going to have to figure out which one is going to be best for you. And since this cut program or this line program mimics just about everything that you're going to deal with in CNC plasma cutting, it's just about perfect for you. I really hope that that line program helps you guys out a little bit. The thing is, there's a ton of things to learn, and there's a ton of things that you got to understand in order to run a table like this and to actually get into it, right? There's no such thing as being like lickety split, like out of the box, like ready to roll kind of thing, you know? There's a lot more that goes into it. I've even seen a handful of people that have bought it and it's been sitting in their garage for weeks, months, whatever, because they just don't know how to use it, but they went ahead and bought it anyway. So the line program will at least give you something to get started with when you get you know, out of the box. But realistically speaking, you're going to be cutting a lot of metal until you get it dialed in just right. But give yourself some slack on this one, because the things that the table is not equipped with that do create downfalls in the cut quality and stuff like that, you know, you could be chasing this for forever and still never get it just right. Again, things like the plasma cutter, things like, you know, your feed speeds, everything else like that, your power output, what you're cutting, everything else like that. It's all stuff that's going to change the output or the cut quality. So don't expect a whole lot, but you know, draw a line, hit a limit or something like that. That way you're not spending like $1,000 on steel just trying to get one part cut. But either way, it's enough to get you started, and that's pretty much where we need to kill this one off at. So what do I ultimately think about the Langmuir Systems 2x2 Crossfire CNC plasma table? Simply put, this is a hobby table. This is not something you should like invest in to base your business off of, right? The only reason I suggest that, and the only reason I'm talking about this, is because I had a lot of people that are like into, you know, have a small business or want to invest into it or get into CNC plasma cutting or something like that. And this would be a very poor choice for that, just because of the fact that it takes so much time, so much maintenance, so much babysitting to make sure that it gets just right. Even if you do get it just right, or if you know, just deal with the stuff that it produces or whatever the case is, if you're just going to deal with it, you're going to spend more time compensating for that, which means if time is money, you're spending more time doing this and less time doing what makes you money. So I would initially save up for something in like the $5,000–6,000 entry-level table range, where they normally start going for. But as a hobby table, right, this is like for the people that want to make some small parts on the side, maybe some thin stuff, maybe some signs, maybe some art, maybe some cool gifts or whatever, you know, thin, inexpensive, lots of time to kill on it, don't really care at the end of the day, not going to stress about it or anything else like that. This machine or this table fills that void between the entry-level table and, you know, doing it by hand. So for a hobby table, exactly what it's advertised as, it's pretty awesome for that. But understand that you're going to have to put in a lot of effort, that it's not just an out-of-the-box deal, you know, cookie cutter package. It's so far from that. But, you know, there's, you know, with everything, that's just kind of the way that it works. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys, and hopefully I don't get beaten apart for my opinion on this one, but take it for what it is. Now, that is going to wrap it up for this episode. I do want to thank you guys for watching. If you are interested in purchasing a Langmuir Systems 2x2 CNC Crossfire plasma cutting table, there is a link down in the description for $100 off of your purchase just for watching this video. And I'd appreciate it if you'd go over there and give that one a click, because the channel actually gets a small commission out of it, which really helps to make these videos and stuff like that. So if you would be so kind, I would appreciate that. If you need any help or support or anything else like that, I'm usually around just the same as I am for welding and fab and everything else like that, but I can't guarantee you I'm always going to be there. So definitely check out like the support groups from Langmuir Systems and stuff like that. And Langmuir Systems has been really awesome about replying to issues and problems and the support there. So they're a really, pretty good company to work with, and I really appreciate them sending this one out. So if you need to get in touch with me, you can definitely click, check the description down below. It'll give you all the information. Hit us up on the fabricationseries.com website, Instagram at the.fabricator, and facebook.com/thefabricatorseries. Want to thank you guys for watching. As always, please like and subscribe for more really awesome videos and more future stuff on CNC plasma cutting and everything else like that. I will catch you guys on the next episode.